Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's webinar. And this is the third workshop in our digital literacy series. There are some fantastic technological tools available for businesses of all shapes and sizes, and of course, that includes not-for-profit organisations as well. Our goal through these sessions is to provide the confidence amongst clubs and associations of all sizes to be able to use the tools that are available to improve their operations. Now, before we kick off, just a reminder that technology is a fantastic servant, but a terrible master. So the focus of this session is therefore to make sure that your understanding and use of technological tools for financial management is linked to your understanding of other important points like being not-for-profit doesn't mean you can't access cool tools, understanding that it's okay to invest some money in tools to improve your efficiency, that, for instance, these tools can save lots of volunteer hours, even if they do take some financial investment and some time to set up in the first place. And of course, that sport is business. In Australia, it's really big business. So while technology and business can seek to replace staff, in the not-for-profit world, what we're looking at is to try and use technology to enhance the role that volunteers play, not to replace them. And that means that if we're making our volunteers more efficient, they'll be able to achieve more and do so in less time. So welcome back to those who have joined us on previous webinars. Anyone who has missed the previous webinars, they are available for viewing on our website at www.cprgroup.com.au/webinars, where you can also register for upcoming sessions and, of course, sign up for our newsletter. For those of you that I don't know and those of you joining us for the first time this evening, my name's Michael Connolly and I'm Managing Director of CPR Group. Since 1997, we've been working regularly with councils and with state and national sport and community organisations on planning projects like master plans, sport and recreation and community strategies, and parks and open space plans, and all sorts of planning at that high level and at the strategic level. But one of the most enjoyable parts of our role is really when we get to get hands-on with volunteers in community organisations, where we get to enjoy the learning journey that people can go on to learn, oh, I didn't know we could do it like that. And both Steve and I say that quite regularly when asked, so why do you do what you do? It's for that, look on people's faces when they just get that final bit of information that they go, now I get it. Now I understand how that sort of information can really help us in our role in delivering great outcomes for our community. And that has been probably the most rewarding part of being involved. This evening, we have an opportunity for you to ask questions. So if you have a look over in the left-hand column, you'll see a little Q&A section over there. If you click on that button, it'll open up a window where you can type in any questions that you've got. If we have time, we'll have a look through those at the end. Of course, if there's any that we miss or any that we don't get to, we'll respond subsequently and get back to you on email afterwards as well. So finally, thanks for joining us and let's kick off. Before we get into a lot of detail about some of the tools that are available, it's important to know that usually the advice that we provide from CPR Group is pretty well timeless. Like, run not like a business, but as the business you are, and understanding that there is psychology behind the work that our volunteers do, and also understanding that the foundations of great planning, great facility planning, and great sport and recreation planning. However, tonight, when we're talking about technology and some specific tools, I'm really happy to admit that some of this stuff is going to go out of date. And that makes this so exciting, this ever-changing topic of technology and how we can access cool tools to make our lives easier evolves really quickly. So for anyone watching in the future, today is Wednesday, the 27th of May, 2020. And so have a look. If you are in the future, have a look around and see if some of the tools that we're talking about maybe don't even exist anymore. I guess that when you look at technology, a lot of it is like an empire. So when Microsoft was the leading empire in the world of technology, we all followed the Microsoft empire. With the return of Steve Jobs to Apple, then Apple has built a big empire as well. And some of us, shifted over there instead. Come what may, we bear some cost for doing that and the data transfer. But if we believe that a transition from one technological system to another is going to help us, then it's fine to be able to do that. So it's always evolving. And of course, there is the juggernaut of Google playing in the mix as well. That said, the importance of great financial management and the foundations of good financial management for a not-for-profit organisation will always remain the same. I like to think that for sporting organisations in particular, as far as financial management goes, organisations kind of resolve themselves into a bell curve, the standard distribution. So if you think about it, down the left-hand edge of this graph, we've got the organisations that just don't get it, the ones who aren't going to get on board. Now, it has been a while, but I have worked with some great organisations whose treasurers literally have a big book. They fold it out, and there is literally a ledger. They write the income in a black pen and any outgoings in a red pen, and it's fascinating to see that. However, they're kind of down that laggard end of this bell curve. Then we've got the stellar performers down on the right-hand side of the screen as well. And those organisations that are down there are taking steps that others often aren't. That might mean taking some risks, but really the risks are an investment of time and maybe an investment of a bit of cost to be able to adopt a new technological system that will improve where we sit. So I do think it's important to understand that if you do reside somewhere in this great big bell in the middle, that it only takes one or a couple of the sorts of tools that we're talking about here this evening to work them into your operations to be able to shift you nicely this way across the bell curve graph. Before we get into the tools, let's just do a quick recap on some of the fundamentals of financial management in general. Remember, not-for-profit does not mean no profit. All it means is that you can't share your profits among members as if they were shareholders. But that's it. How much can we make? No limit. How can we spend it? Well, as long as it's in support of our objects, no limit. When do we have to spend it? Well, again, as long as it's in line with your objects, there is no limit. Sport, as I said right at the top, is business. And look, with the exception of the COVID-19 shutdown, sport usually brings in to the Australian economy $13 billion a year. Now, write that number down. It takes up a whole whiteboard. There are a lot of zeros on that number. So don't run like a business. Run as the business you are. Understand that sport is business and take the same sorts of steps that good small businesses are taking. They're adopting technology to improve and streamline the way that they do business. It often falls to the treasurer to do everything when it comes to financial management in sport and recreation organisations. That doesn't need to be the case, and I reckon it shouldn't be the case. As far as accountability goes, at least, it is the entire management committee that is accountable for the financial standing of your organisation. Therefore, it's critical that the entire management committee knows your position. They know where we're sitting at the moment. So having access to great financial tools that are a system rather than a book or a computer that only one person can access provides a greater level of transparency and also a greater level of transferability of the financials of your organization. And you don't want to make the treasurer feel locked in. So let's look at what systems are available and let's expand how we can do business. I'd like to start, though, before we get into the cool stuff, with something really simple, a spreadsheet. Back in, it was maybe 9 years ago, I remember being with a group and just running a bit of an exercise. Now, I knew that I had access to spreadsheeting software and I knew that I'd be able to do some really simple calculations. I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a tool that separated the money that we make from what we do, if we're running, let's say, a soccer club, the money that we make by putting kids and players on the field, if that covered all of what it costs us to run this organization, wouldn't that be great? Almost the holy grail. If we could make sure at the planning stages, that is before it's too late, that we were going to cover the cost of our operations by the income from our operations, wouldn't that be a win? So after that, we just made the spreadsheet. So it is literally a spreadsheet. If you've got access to a spreadsheeting tool, this one was made in Excel, it will be able to develop your understanding of how to set your budget and even how to set your fees to make sure that you're going to end the season in the black. So all that we do is break up each area of our financial management. So we'll start here with income on this sheet. And instead of just lumping it all together, we separate it out and we say, what are the costs that our customers pay us for the benefit of playing our sport? So in this case, it's membership registrations, and this club looks like they charge a bit of game fees, some coaching clinics, and some gate takings. But for most organisations, it's actually only one. The only time that your customers pay to access your services is when they pay for registering as a member in the first place. So you can see what we've listed there as ancillary income in the white. They are all of the things that members don't need to pay. While if I want to play here, I have to pay my membership fees to run on the field, with which comes insurance and registration up the line with our regional, state and national body and international federation. I don't need to buy a snag from the canteen or a beer from the bar. So these things become ancillary income. When we then take the same approach with our expenditure, we can see there are a lot of things that we have to spend money on to be able to run the organisation, all of these green ones in the sport-related expenditure. But the list of ancillary expenditure is about the same, all of the costs of goods sold. So then all we need to do is use the information that this spreadsheet gives us to determine what's our total sport-related income, less our total sport-related expenditure, and are we going to run at a profit or a loss when we divide that by our anticipated number of members in here. So this, literally a very simple spreadsheet, will do those calculations for you. And this organisation can see that they're running at a loss of about $40 per player. So while it looked on the bottom line here like they're running at a profit, when it comes to the sport, they're subsidising their players to the tune of $40 a pop. Now, this committee might say that's fine, but seriously, I've run this exercise and come up with figures in there approaching the thousands of dollars, not just tens or hundreds. So you've got to be conscious of what our actual outgoings are to make sure that our business model supports how we want to be operating. Obviously, then there becomes the public relations section of getting this message across, where you need to sell the idea to members. So the spreadsheet simply builds a little chart. So we haven't touched on the surface of anything really technical, or of course anything that you need to pay for, before we've realized that just developing a spreadsheet can be really helpful in using that information, giving you the information to be able to use in your forward planning for your money. Remember also that when we set a budget, even if it's as simple and high level as the one we've just been through, when we're reporting against that budget, it's telling us a story. So when we report looking over our shoulder, the treasurer will present a financial report for the last month, quarter, or year, and we can see a number. But it's just a number. As soon as we can contrast that number against our budget number, there's a story. If the two numbers are the same, we can interrogate why they're the same. If the budget was higher than the actuals, we can look at why, or if vice versa is the case, we can also look at why. And then we can adjust our behaviour to either make more money or reduce expenditure by looking at the areas that we can control, rather than getting to the end of the year and say, oh, that number's a very big red one. We didn't want to end up there. So a simple spreadsheet can be a great way to do that. When we take one step more into the realm of complexity, we get into our accounting package software. So here are some pretty good examples of the sorts of things that are available on the market right now. Now, some of these are free, some of these are inexpensive, and others have the ability for not-for-profits to be able to access discounted rates for being non-profit organisations. The benefit of using an online accounting package to keep your financials is that it is so easily transferable. So all of these systems have been developed based on a wonderful user experience. So user interface, a UI, or a user experience, a UX. And what that means is that as a user who is somebody who can click around on the internet, there's a very good chance that I will be able to click around and find the best way to use these tools. If, however, you are just using the little Excel icon over there on the right, that doesn't necessarily count because Excel doesn't automate any of the processes. If we take some of the examples here, say, all of these ones around here, they all have a level of automation that can connect to your bank feed, for instance, which, while it doesn't completely automate the reconciliation process, it certainly makes it a lot easier and a lot quicker. Speaking from experience, when we moved from our 90s based clunky old grey looking Windows 95 type accounting system to, and the one that we have most experience with here is Xero for financial management in particular. Seriously, the time that we invested in bookkeeping, what we were spending in time per month is now less than what we were spending in time per week. And the experiences that I have had with clubs in exactly the same boat is overwhelming. And that's not necessarily just focusing on one system. I've heard similar stories around all of these organizations, or from all of these providers as well. I do want to just touch quickly here at this point on Asset Track. So while that will be the subject of a webinar on its own, including a demo of the system, it is important to know that especially for the groups joining us who are Queensland based, you must keep an asset register under the Associations Incorporation regulation. So the asset register that you can access in Asset Track not only creates the register, it also keeps it real time and it links your assets with the maintenance that you're doing on those assets. So of course, sign up for the webinar that's specifically about Asset Track to learn more, but it is important to include asset management in this part of the discussion because it's actually a requirement under the Act. Then we look at how we pay our money out. At the moment, it has become pretty commonplace for most community organisations to have replaced their old checkbooks with electronic funds transfer only, with dual authorised electronic funds transfer. If your bank makes it difficult, change banks. Seriously, it is just too important to make sure that you've got flexibility in the way that you can authorize payments, yet protect the financial standing of your organization. That if a bank has limitations, and unfortunately it's some of the community banks and smaller banks who have unnecessary limitations now, that can be the trigger to say, well, we're moving into the future and our bank needs to come with us. So it's okay to change. But I'm not just talking about EFT. So when we make a payment that we can log on and set up the payment and then have somebody else under a separate login authorize that payment for it to go through. I'm also talking about replacing your cash payments or the payments you make by check to some suppliers with digital payments using these two. And now they're both familiar logos, Visa and MasterCard. And of course there are others, but these are the two that are most popular or most common in Australia. And both offer non-credit options. So Visa debit and MasterCard debit. So that means that instead of giving, let's just take a pretty standard community type club situation, instead of giving $500 in cash from our petty cash tin to our canteen convener to go and stock up the canteen, we can provide that $500 on a preloaded debit card. So we can meet all of our financial reporting obligations with dual signatory and with the necessity to keep a petty cash system on the Impress system in our organization. We can manage all of that electronically and provide a card instead of cash. Now, while I used to get pulled up on this quite a bit to say, well, Michael, you can't be recommending that people have credit cards. We're a club, for crying out loud. It's traceable. So as soon as it's on a card, the transactions are traceable. It makes theft much more difficult, and heaven forbid we've got anyone who's likely to steal our money from our community organisations. But it's also by accident. It makes losing that money when it's on a card much more difficult. And if it is genuine theft or a loss of a card that is reported, then typically those are covered by your bank anyway. So these sorts of steps can, for some organizations, be quite a big step. For others, it's just a logical step. But please don't ever feel that it's not the sort of step that it's okay to take. That said, let's now move on to when you receive money. We work with some organizations who have made the bold step of going cashless. Now, not too long ago, that would have seemed almost impossible for community sport. But now it is possible because of the systems that are available to us and the fact that they have become so much more affordable. So what I'm talking about here is instead of having a cash-only canteen, you could have a card canteen and it doesn't need to cost you the earth. So while the options that I've got over here on the left hand of the screen are dealing with organisations that have entered the market quite a bit later, and in fact Square beat PayPal to the market, but not necessarily in Australia. Both of these providers, you literally just pop into Officeworks and buy these readers, the card readers, connect them to your phone, and away you go. Admittedly, I'm making that sound a little easier than it is because, in effect, you're setting up a bank account. So you need to meet all of the all of the identification requirements as if you were opening a bank account before you can start to use these for the club, for the business account for the club. But in all honesty, it's well worth the effort. Of course, the big four Australian banks have also played a bit of catch up with the way that they can also provide more affordable solutions for electronic funds transfer receiving, particularly for community groups. But the difference is for these two, there's no ongoing fees. You pay a transaction fee, but no account keeping fee. For these ones, unfortunately, we've still got some account keeping fees that are working their way into those options. Have a look what's available, and before jumping in and going and getting and organising Square or PayPal, see what your bank can do. So it's definitely worthwhile having a discussion to see what's available from your bank. Now I'd like to touch on a topic that is SaaS. Now, I'm not talking about that awful drink that I used to hate drinking in a can. I'm talking about SaaS, SaaS, software as a service. So this is basically where I can have access to an app that I log into. So, well, in fact, most of the software options that I was talking about back here are SaaS services. So I log in using a web browser, and there I've got access to my data, to my database in the back end. But we've come right down now to the point where we've got point of sale systems that are purely driven in the cloud. So the two options that I mentioned on the previous slide with Square and PayPal here, if you subscribe to these systems, and by subscribe, I mean open what ends up being a free account with a free app plus a purchased reader, and the readers, we're talking $50 or $100, we're not dealing with a lot of money. There's no ongoing costs apart from the per transaction fee. Now, that's something that means that you can enjoy a great level of control over the way that you can see the money coming in and you can see the money going out. If you want to take a step up from there, then systems like Counter or Vend are actually driven not necessarily for the not-for-profit sector, but for business. So these are the sorts of things that you see on the counters when you're buying coffee or getting your hair cut that look like that. It's an iPad talking to the cloud, talking to a reader, talking to a printer that collects your money. And not only does it take your money, it also records where that money has come from. So with a very simple app, you can tap what people have purchased, how many, and it will calculate what you need to charge, and then you hit charge. It ignites the reader and away you go. So it is an amazing step up, and certainly a big step up from the old cash registers in canteens where, we don't use the fact that they're all programmed because we've got volunteers coming in and I'll just hit no sale and put it in. But there's no tracking then of where our money goes. So the data that you collect by using these systems is fantastic from a money only point of view, but extrapolate it out from there and you realize that you also get much better control with your stock. So you can see where the stock's going. You can see where you are running out of stock as well. Then we get into direct debit as well. So direct debit means that, we're a business. I have direct debit set up with school fees, with where I pay regularly. So especially for those clubs that are still offering the options of payment plans for members, I can honestly say that the job that the treasurers that I get to talk to hate the most is when they have to play debt collector. And they say, I just don't like going and asking people for money. Now, from my point of view, I'm very happy to do that because there's a contract. You agreed to pay us a certain amount of money for us, the club, to be able to provide you the service that we are offering, membership and all of the benefits that it offers. If you fail your end, then it's okay for us to fail our end. So I don't mind asking for money to complete a contract that was agreed. But having a direct debit system already set up means that the money will be automatically transacted out of the customer's account into your account based on the agreement that you have set up. Rather than having to, because from a consumer point of view, you need to be very careful about with whom you set up a direct debit in the first place to make sure they're a reputable organisation and that they won't dishonour any of the agreement that you have with them. So that's why there are third-party providers like the examples that I've got on the screen here that can provide a lot of those services on your behalf. You'll pay a a fee for that, of course. That's how they make money. So my advice here is it's worthwhile shopping around. Understand your situation and shop your situation around. And that doesn't mean just doing a web search. It means getting in touch with people at these organizations to ask them those direct questions. And finally, money isn't limited to our accounting systems and our accounting packages. It also plays on our general operations. So the examples that I've got here touch on things like booking systems, these top four up here, that you can use to not only allocate field space, room availability, but even to collect payment. And anywhere you can automate payment, anywhere you can take a volunteer out of the system is much better for that volunteer and much more streamlined for getting your money into your system. Of course, there are also great options for facility access, and the tennis booker court is another system here, but it also comes down to where we can save money. So electronic light switching options that can even be driven from mobile apps have the opportunity to save money by making sure that lights are turned off when they're not being used, but also where you have a prorated charging schedule with teams or with separate clubs, they can be passed on based on actual usage. Again, it's a great way to collect real data that not only supports your ability to make money, but your ability to make sure that you're spending money in the right way. I've seen over in the Q&A that a few questions have come in, so let me have a look through those. So there's a great comment in here saying that Square has that they've had some trouble setting up Square as an incorporated body. So that is a very important point there. So at the moment, I don't have any answers off the top of my head, but it's certainly something that I'm happy to look into as well. Which accounting programs are cheaper? Okay, I'm happy to give you a little bit of an insight here on this slide and let you know that Xero, we're talking $50 to $60 per month for Xero and MyOb and QuickBooks. They are competing with each other. Zoho Books is similar. FreshBooks is about half that, and Sasu a little bit cheaper again. For an entry-level system that has basic functionality, Wave is actually free. It's a Canadian company, and at an entry level, it's free. So they have paid add-ons, but at the entry level, it's free. Some of the others, however, do, as I mentioned before, have not-for-profit discounts available. Another question, how hard is it to set the tools up? Not particularly difficult for the most part. There are some that take a bit of time, but from my point of view, it's well worth investing that time, because if you take the time to set up the systems at the front, you'll buy that time. I can almost guarantee it that you'll make that time back very, very quickly. And can you recommend your favorite apps? Look, I'd love to recommend my favorite apps. If you watch through this video again, you might get some, I don't know, maybe I've let out some subliminal favoritism, but I just fear that they'll go out of date too quickly. So the benefit that the best way to benefit from these systems that I can share with you is to understand your needs first. So we've helped some clubs set up a lot of these systems and tools, and we've done so through our Club Tags program, the logo down there in the bottom left. And look, if you'd like to explore some stories that we've got, please feel free to touch base with us, and I'm very happy for us to share those sorts of stories with you. Underlying all of them is that you need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and then find the tool that best meets that goal. Take training on board as well. So where there is training available from providers directly or from third-party resellers and integrators, by all means, take that up. Some accounting firms will also provide assistance in transitioning your chart of accounts into the software options that we've discussed and integrating them with some of the other systems on the market. It's not necessarily going to be the last time that you change systems. So when you set up your system, it's worthwhile investing the time in setting it up correctly so that your data is intact. The better shape your data's in, the easier it is to move it between SaaS systems. So I can definitely encourage you to ask for professional help, and that, of course, includes asking for our help as well. So asking for external assistance can really challenge the way that you think day to day, because sometimes you can miss the real opportunities that are just beyond your reach because you're looking at something that is based on your situation as it is, without taking into consideration what may be available just over the horizon. So, as I mentioned, our upcoming webinars will be touching on the use of tools for asset management, so specifically Asset Track for asset management, and then a subsequent webinar on Meeting Track for meeting management as well. We will also be providing some insight into the actual use of those systems and some practical how-to guides there. The sign-up link for all of our upcoming webinars is already live on our website at cprgroup.com.au/webinars. And like I said, don't be a stranger. Please make sure that you touch base with us and ask any questions that arise from any of the topics that we're talking about. As usual, it's been a great pleasure talking to you this evening, and I look forward to your company next time.